The 3 silver stars were the only difference between the woman in the handcuffs and the men brutalizing her. Those 3 silver stars, hidden in the glove box, represented the full might of the United States Army. On a rainy night in Georgia, 2 corrupt officers, blinded by prejudice and power, made the mistake of a lifetime. They saw a black woman in a luxury car and assumed she was a criminal. They did not know they were manhandling Lieutenant General Zara Voss, the woman who commanded the logistics for the entire eastern seaboard. They thought they were making an arrest. They were actually signing the death warrants for their own careers. The phone call she was about to make would not just bring a lawyer, it would bring the Pentagon. The rain hammered against the windshield of the charcoal gray Range Rover, blurring the neon lights of the roadside diners into long, weeping streaks of color. Inside the cabin, the silence was absolute, save for the rhythmic thump and hiss of the wipers. Lieutenant General Zara Voss exhaled a long, controlled breath, the kind she usually reserved for the Situation Room during a geopolitical crisis. Tonight, however, the crisis was merely fatigue. Though her posture, rigid even in the plush leather driver's seat, suggested a timeless ironclad discipline. She was dressed in civilian attire, a simple cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark slacks. To the untrained eye, she looked like a successful realtor or perhaps a university dean. There was no uniform, no ribbon rack, and certainly no visible rank to shield her from the assumptions of the outside world. Zara checked the dashboard clock. She was still en route to Fort Benning, returning from a private memorial service for a fallen comrade in Atlanta. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the rearview mirror. Headlights. They had been there for miles, not passing, not falling back, just hovering in the blind spot. Aggressive and predatory, she eased her foot off the accelerator, dropping slightly below the speed limit to let them pass. The vehicle behind her matched the deceleration. Zara's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She knew the protocol. She knew the statistics, but knowing them did not stop the cold prickle of adrenaline that started at the base of her neck. Then came the lights. Blue and red exploded in the rearview mirror, fracturing the darkness. The siren did not wail. It gave a short, authoritative whoop-whoop, demanding submission. "Okay," Zara whispered to the empty car. "Just a routine stop. License, registration, insurance." She signaled, pulling the heavy SUV onto the gravel shoulder of Route 9. The Georgia pines loomed like jagged teeth on either side of the road. She put the car in park, turned on the interior dome light, a crucial move for visibility and safety, and placed both hands on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread. In the side mirror, she watched the patrol car door open. A figure emerged. He was young, white, with a buzz cut that looked too severe for his skull shape. He walked with a swagger that spoke of boredom and unearned authority. Officer Dax Riley. He was several years into the force, with a personnel file already thick with use-of-force complaints that had been conveniently swept under the rug by his union rep. Riley approached the passenger side first, shining a high-lumen tactical flashlight directly into the cabin. The beam cut through the tinted glass, blinding Zara momentarily. She did not flinch. She stared straight ahead. He circled the back of the car, tapping the taillight, a superstition, or perhaps a way to leave fingerprints. He came to the driver's window. He did not knock. He just stood there, the beam of the flashlight fixed on her face. Zara lowered the window. The smell of rain and wet asphalt rushed in. "Good evening, officer," she said. Her voice was calm, the voice that had briefed presidents and calmed panicked privates under mortar fire. "How can I help you?" Riley did not answer immediately. He chewed on something, maybe gum, maybe tobacco. He leaned down, his forearms resting on the doorframe, invading her space. "Nice car," Riley said. It was not a compliment. It was an accusation. "Thank you," Zara replied, neutral. "Whose is it?" "It is mine, officer." Riley smirked, a quick, ugly twitch of the lips. "Yours? That's a $100,000 vehicle." "You from around here, Mom?" "I am stationed at Fort Benning," she said, keeping her answers short. "I am returning to base." "Base? Huh?" Riley chuckled. "You work at the commissary? Maybe the laundry service. My cousin works the mess hall over there." Zara felt the insult land. heavy and gross, but she let it slide off her armor. "I am an officer in the United States Army. Now, may I ask why I was pulled over?" Riley's face hardened. He did not like the tone. He did not like the lack of fear. He stood up straight, his hand drifting to his belt, resting near his holster. "We've had reports of a stolen vehicle matching this description moving through the county." Riley lied. It was the oldest trick in the book. There was no report. There was only a black woman in an expensive car on a lonely road. License and registration. "Now it is in the glove box," Zara said, narrating her movements. "I am going to reach over and get it." "Don't you move," Riley barked, his hand snapping to his gun. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "You just asked for my identification," Zara said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of command. "I cannot provide it without moving my hands, officer." Riley stared at her, his eyes glassy with a mix of adrenaline and confusion. He was not used to logic. He was used to panic. He tapped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I've got a non-compliant subject on Route 9, requesting backup." Zara closed her eyes for a split second. Non-compliant. The magic word that justified everything that came next. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. Within minutes, a second cruiser screeched to a halt behind Riley's vehicle. The headlights from the second car added to the blinding glare, turning the wet road into a stage. Sergeant Lyle Beckett stepped out. He was an older man, heavy-set with a mustache that hid a mouth permanently turned downward in dissatisfaction. Beckett was a veteran of the Oak Creek Police Department. He was the fixer, the man who taught rookies like Riley how to write reports that covered up bruises and broken bones. Beckett waddled up to the window, rain darkening his uniform shirt. Riley briefed him in a hushed, frantic tone, pointing at Zara as if she were a loaded weapon. "Says she's military," Riley whispered loud enough for Zara to hear. Acting arrogant, refused to show ID. "I think she's high or holding." Beckett nodded, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Zara. He saw exactly what Riley saw. A target. He leaned into the window. "Mom," Beckett drawled, "step out of the vehicle." "Officer," Zara said, her patience fraying by a thread, "I have identified myself as an Army officer. I am requesting you check my license plate. It is registered to the Department of Defense database. If you run the tag, you will see." "I did not ask for a speech," Beckett shouted, spit flying from his lips. "I said step out of the car now, or we will remove you." Zara weighed her options. If she stayed, they would break the glass. They would drag her out through the shards. If she exited, she was vulnerable. But she maintained dignity. "I am exiting the vehicle," she announced clearly. She unbuckled her seatbelt. She opened the door. The moment her foot touched the wet gravel, Riley grabbed her left arm. He did not guide her. He yanked her. Zara stumbled, her dress shoes slipping on the mud. "Easy!" she snapped, instinctively pulling her arm back. "She's resisting!" Riley screamed. It was a performance for the dash cam. "Stop resisting." "I am not resisting," Zara stated, planting her feet. "I am a Lieutenant General in the United States Army. You are making a grave mistake." Riley laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Yeah, and I'm the Queen of England. Turn around, hands on the hood." They slammed her forward. The cold metal of the Range Rover's hood bit into her cheek. Her arms were wrenched behind her back with unnecessary force, twisting the rotator cuffs. The pain was sharp, hot, and immediate. "You are assaulting a superior officer," Zara hissed through gritted teeth. "You ain't no officer," Beckett grunted, leaning his full weight onto her lower back to keep her pinned. "You're a suspect in a grand theft auto investigation." Riley grabbed the handcuffs from his belt. The ratcheting sound of the metal teeth closing around her wrists was the loudest sound in the night. Click, click, click. They tightened them until they bit into the bone. Zara Voss, who commanded thousands of troops, who had overseen the logistics of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, who held a Ph.D. in strategic studies, stood handcuffed in the rain, rainwater mixing with the road grit on her face. "Empty your pockets," Beckett ordered Riley. Riley shoved his hand into her pocket, pulling out her phone, a sleek, government-issued smartphone with high-level encryption. "Look at this," Riley said, turning it over. "Password protected. Probably dealing. That is government property, Zara said, her voice deadly calm. Now, if you attempt to access that device, you are violating federal espionage laws. Riley looked at the phone, then at Zara. He felt a flicker of doubt, but his ego smothered it. He dropped the phone. It was not an accident. He opened his hand and let it fall face down onto the jagged gravel. Then, with a casual cruelty, he stepped on it, grinding his heel into the screen. The crunch of glass was sickening. "Oops!" Riley sneered. "Slippery hands." Zara watched the device shatter. That phone was her lifeline. It was her direct line to Colonel Elias Thorne, her chief of staff. It contained codes. It contained contacts. But Riley and Beckett had made a critical error in their assessment of the technology. They assumed the phone was the only way she could communicate. They did not know about the Range Rover's integrated telematic system, nor did they notice the simple black Garmin tactical watch on her left wrist, which was currently recording audio and monitoring her heart rate. "Get her in the back," Beckett said, wiping rain from his eyes. "We'll sort this out at the station. Let the boys in impound tear this car apart." They dragged her away from her vehicle. As they shoved her into the cramped, plastic-smelling back seat of the cruiser, Zara caught a glimpse of a house across the road. A curtain twitched. Someone was watching. Mrs. Beatrice Caldwell. Zara did not know the name then, but the elderly white woman watching from her porch across the road had seen the whole thing. And Mrs. Caldwell had her own iPad recording the scene through her living room window. The back seat of a police cruiser is designed to dehumanize. It is hard plastic, devoid of comfort, smelling of old sweat, vomit, and industrial cleaner. Zara sat awkwardly, her hands numb behind her back. The handcuffs were too tight. She could feel the circulation cutting off to her thumbs. In the front seat, Riley and Beckett were laughing. The tension had broken, replaced by the adrenaline high of the bust. "Did you hear her?" Riley scoffed, glancing in the rearview mirror. "I'm a general, man. These people will say anything. I had one last week tell me he was the mayor's nephew." Beckett chuckled, starting the engine. Turned out he was just a line cook at Denny's. Zara stared at the back of Riley's head. She was memorizing the shape of his ears, the way his hair grew on his neck. She was building a file in her mind. "Officer," Zara said, "before you drive away, you need to check the glove compartment of my vehicle." "We'll check it when we inventory it for towing," Beckett said dismissively. "If you tow that vehicle," Zara said, "you will trigger a remote security lockdown that will alert the nearest military police detachment. That vehicle contains classified documents in a secure lockbox in the trunk." The car went silent. Beckett hit the brakes. The cruiser had not moved yet, but his foot hovered over the pedal. He looked at Riley. "Classified documents? She's bluffing, Lyle," Riley said, though his voice wavered. "Look at her. She's in a sweater. Generals wear uniforms." "Not when they are off duty," Zara corrected. "My common access card, my military ID, is in the center console under the sunglasses." "If you're smart, you will go get it." Beckett hesitated. The absolute certainty in her voice was piercing through his bias. He turned off the engine. "Go look," Beckett ordered Riley. "Lyle, come on." "Go look, Dax," Beckett snapped. "If she is military, I want to know before we book her so we can charge her with impersonating an officer too." "Nail the coffin shut." Riley groaned, opened the door, and ran back through the rain to the Range Rover. Zara watched him through the rain-streaked window. She saw him open the driver's side door. He rummaged around. A moment later, Riley froze. He was standing half in, half out of the Range Rover. He pulled something out. He held it up to the dome light. It was a standard DoD Common Access card, but it was not the green stripe of a contractor or the white of a standard soldier. It had the distinct markings of a high-ranking commissioned officer, and next to it, he found a small leather wallet. He opened it. A gold badge gleamed inside, along with a laminated card featuring 3 stars. Riley stared at the ID. He looked back at the cruiser. He looked down at the ID again. He ran back to the cruiser looking pale. He jumped in the front seat, water dripping from his nose. He did not speak. He just handed the ID to Beckett. Beckett took it. He squinted at the photo. He looked back at Zara in the cage. He looked at the card again. Lieutenant General Zara Voss, United States Army. Holy, Beckett trailed off. Is it fake? Riley asked, desperate hope in his voice. It's got to be fake. You can buy those online, right? Beckett rubbed his face. It's got the holographic chip, Dax. It feels real. So what? Riley said, his aggression returning as a defense mechanism. So she's in the Army. Doesn't mean she didn't steal the car. Doesn't mean she wasn't resisting. Beckett turned around in his seat, looking at Zara through the plexiglass. You really a general? I am, Zara said. And you have currently kidnapped a senior military official. You have destroyed government property. And you have assaulted me. Every second I remain in these handcuffs adds a year to the federal prison sentence you are facing. Beckett turned back to Riley. We can't unarrest her, Dax. We already called it in. Dispatch knows we have a suspect in custody, so we stick to the story, Riley said, his eyes wild. She was swerving. She was belligerent. We found the ID after she kicked me. Yeah, she kicked me. That's assault on an officer. That trumps the military thing. Zara listened in disbelief. They were doubling down. Instead of apologizing and releasing her, they were conspiring to frame her to save their own skins. You are making it worse, Zara warned. Shut up! Riley yelled, banging his hand on the dashboard. You don't talk! You're a suspect! Beckett started the car. We take her to the station. We book her quick. We call the chief. Pike will know what to do. We bury this in paperwork before the Army finds out. Zara leaned back against the hard plastic seat. She closed her eyes. They thought destroying her phone had cut her off. They thought they could outrun the truth. She shifted her wrist. The Garmin watch was still active. She pressed the side button 3 times in rapid succession. It was a distress macro she had programmed for kidnapping scenarios overseas. It did not call 911. It sent a GPS ping and a code red alert to a server in the Pentagon's Security Division. The signal went up to a satellite, bounced down to a secure operations center in Virginia, and flashed onto a screen monitored by a sleepy sergeant. The sergeant sat up, spilling his coffee. Sir, I have a distress beacon from General Voss. It's domestic, Georgia. Back in the rain, the cruiser pulled onto the road, carrying Zara toward a jail cell. But the clock had started. The countdown to their destruction was ticking. The fluorescent lights of the Oak Creek Police Department hummed with a headache-inducing buzz. The station smelled of stale coffee and floor wax, a scent that usually signaled safety to the citizens of the county. But tonight it reeked of corruption. Officer Dax Riley shoved Zara through the heavy security door, parading her past the dispatch desk like a trophy. She stumbled slightly, her wrists screaming in protest as the handcuffs bit deeper, but she regained her footing instantly. She held her head high, her eyes scanning every detail of the room, the tactical map on the wall, the duty roster, the open evidence locker. Booking, Riley announced loudly to the room. Resisting arrest, assault on an officer, possible stolen vehicle. The desk sergeant, a woman named Linda with tired eyes, looked up from her computer. She saw the well-dressed black woman in handcuffs, saw the grim set of Beckett's jaw, and frowned. Assault? Linda asked, eyeing Zara's petite frame against Riley's bulk. Really, Dax? She kicked me, Riley lied effortlessly, right in the shin, hurt like hell. Get the chief, Beckett grunted, unlocking Zara's handcuffs, only to slam her hand down onto the fingerprint scanner. We need to fast-track this. She's claiming she's some kind of military big shot. Zara rubbed her wrists. Deep red welts circled the dark skin. She did not complain. She did not ask for ice. She simply turned to the camera for her mugshot, her face a mask of terrifying neutrality. The door to the back office swung open and Chief Desmond Pike emerged. He was a man who wore his authority like a cheap suit, ill-fitting and abrasive. He had been the chief for years, running the department like a personal fiefdom. "What's the noise?" Pike demanded, holding a half-eaten sandwich. "Suspect was uncooperative, Chief," Beckett said, handing over Zara's military ID. "Claims she's a lieutenant general. We found this in the car after she assaulted Riley." Pike took the ID. He looked at it, then at Zara. He did not see a general. He saw a problem. He saw a lawsuit waiting to happen unless they buried it under a mountain of criminal charges. "General Voss," Pike said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "You're a long way from base." "I am stationed at Fort Benning," Zara replied, her voice cutting through the room's noise. "I was returning from official duty. Your officers profiled me, illegally detained me, destroyed my government-issued communication device, and assaulted me." Pike laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "That's a nice story. But my officers say you were swerving. They say you were combative, and in this county, their word goes." He leaned in close, his breath smelling of onions. "Here's how this works. You plead out to a misdemeanor, disorderly conduct. We drop the assault charge. You pay a fine. You go home. No fuss, no press. It was a shakedown, plain and simple. They wanted her to admit guilt so they could not be sued later." Zara stared at him. "I will not plead to anything. I am innocent, and I am demanding my phone call." Pike sighed, tossing her ID onto the desk. "Fine, give her the phone. One call. Make it count." Riley shoved a greasy landline receiver toward her. "Don't call your boyfriend. He can't help you." Zara picked up the receiver. She did not call a lawyer. She did not call a bail bondsman. She dialed a number from memory, a direct encrypted line that bypassed the standard switchboard at Fort Benning. It rang once. "Command post, Colonel Elias Thorne speaking." A crisp voice answered. "Code red," Zara said clearly. "Identification Voss Alpha 1, location Oak Creek Police Department, hostile extraction required." The line went silent for a heartbeat. "General." Thorne's voice lost its professional detachment, replaced by sharp urgency. "Are you injured, ma'am?" "Affirmative. Unlawful detention. Local law enforcement is hostile. They have destroyed my comms. I am currently being processed." "Understood," Thorne said. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor echoed down the line. "Sit tight, General. We are spinning up the QRF. ETA is soon. Do not, I repeat, do not engage further. We are coming." Zara hung up. Riley smirked. "Code red? What, are you in a movie? Who was that? Your pizza delivery guy?" Zara turned to face the three men. For the first time all night, she permitted herself a small, cold smile. "That," she said softly, "was the United States Army." Pike rolled his eyes. "Put her in holding cell 2. Let her cool off." As Riley dragged her toward the cells, Zara did not fight. She walked with her head high, counting the seconds. Colonel Elias Thorne did not just call a lawyer. He called everyone. The moment the line went dead, the operations center at Fort Benning exploded into action. Thorne, a man who had served tours in the Middle East and owed his career to General Voss's mentorship, slammed his hand onto the alert button on his console. "Listen up!" Thorne roared to the room of stunned analysts. "The general has been taken. This is not a drill. I want the quick reaction force spun up now. Get the JAG Corps on the line. Wake up Colonel Bryce Kane. I don't care if he's sleeping. Get him in a car." Within minutes, the base was buzzing. Lieutenant Colonel Rhea Langford, the commander of the military police battalion, was already in her boots before the siren finished its first wail. "Load up," she ordered her squad. "Full kit. We have a hostage situation involving a high-value target." "Hostage, ma'am?" a young sergeant asked, checking his rifle. "Who has her? Terrorists?" Langford's face was grim. "Worse. Local cops with a god complex." Back at the Oak Creek Police Department, the mood was self-congratulatory. Riley was recounting the arrest to Linda, embellishing the story with every sentence. Beckett was filling out the arrest report, checking boxes that would ruin a civilian's life: resisting, assault, reckless driving. Chief Pike was in his office, feet up on the desk, watching a football game on a small TV. He felt good. He had handled the uppity woman. She'd plead out by morning. Then the phone rang. Linda picked it up. "Oak Creek Police." She frowned. "Who?" "The governor's office." She covered the mouthpiece. "Chief, it's the governor's aide." Pike's feet dropped to the floor. "What?" Before he could reach for the phone, another line lit up. Then another. Then the fax machine in the corner started screeching, spitting out paper at a frantic pace. "Chief," Beckett called out, looking at the window. "You might want to see this." Pike walked to the front window. The rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and black. At first it was just a low rumble like distant thunder, but the sky was clear. The rumble grew louder, vibrating the glass in the panes. Then the lights appeared. Not the flashing blue of police cruisers. These were stark white tactical lights. A convoy of 4 Humvees painted in woodland camouflage roared down Main Street. They were moving fast, ignoring the stop signs, moving in a tight, aggressive formation. Behind them were 2 black SUVs with government plates, and above them, chopping the night air into submission, was a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. It hovered low over the station, its downdraft kicking up trash and dust from the parking lot, shaking the building to its foundations. "Jesus Christ," Riley whispered, his face draining of color. The convoy screeched to a halt directly in front of the station, blocking the exit. Doors flew open. Soldiers poured out. They were not standard infantry. These were military police, wearing tactical vests, helmets, and carrying M4 carbines at the low ready. They moved with a terrifying fluid precision that made Riley's earlier swagger look like a toddler's tantrum. Leading them was Colonel Thorne, flanked by 2 men in suits who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast. Military lawyers. Thorne did not knock. He kicked the front door open so hard it cracked the safety glass. The lobby of the police station went deathly silent. Linda shrank behind her desk. Riley put his hand on his holster instinctively. "Don't even think about it, son," Colonel Thorne barked, his voice filling the room. "Unless you want to start a war, you will lose in seconds." Rifles were pointed at the 3 police officers. The laser sights danced on their chests. Chief Pike came running out of his office, his face purple. "What the hell is this? You can't just storm a police station. This is my jurisdiction." Thorne stepped forward, towering over the chief. He held up a piece of paper, one of the faxes that had just come through. "Your jurisdiction ended the moment you kidnapped a United States general officer," Thorne said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I am Colonel Elias Thorne. I am here to retrieve Lieutenant General Zara Voss, and if she has so much as a scratch on her, I will dismantle this building brick by brick." "She's a suspect," Pike sputtered, though he was sweating profusely. "She assaulted an officer." "Where is she?" Thorne roared. "Cell 2, Beckett squeaked, pointing down the hall. "Langford, get her," Thorne ordered. "Secure the perimeter. No one leaves. No one touches a phone. This is now a federal crime scene." Lieutenant Colonel Langford and 2 MPs sprinted down the hallway. They found Zara sitting on the narrow bench in the holding cell. She looked up as they arrived. "Took you long enough," Zara said dryly. "Traffic was murder, ma'am," Langford said, a grin breaking through her serious demeanor. "Let's get you out of here." Langford keyed the lock and swung the door open. Zara stepped out. She did not look like a victim anymore. She looked like exactly what she was, the person in charge. She walked back into the lobby. The silence was absolute. Riley was shaking. Beckett was staring at the floor. Pike looked like he was having a cardiac event. Zara stopped in front of Officer Riley. She looked at his name tag, then at his terrified face. "Officer Riley," she said calmly, "you stepped on my phone. You destroyed government property containing classified encryption keys. Do you know what the penalty is for that under the Espionage Act?" Riley tried to speak, but no sound came out. "It is 20 years, Zara whispered. "Minimum." She turned to Thorne. "Colonel, I want these 3 men detained. I want their dash cam footage seized immediately before they can delete it, and I want the FBI on the phone." "Already done, General," Thorne said. "The Bureau is en route. We're taking jurisdiction." Riley looked at Pike. "Chief, do something." Pike looked at the soldiers, the rifles, and the Black Hawk hovering outside. He looked at Riley. "Shut up, Dax," Pike whispered. "You're on your own." The trap had snapped shut, but the real punishment had not even begun. The dawn broke over Oak Creek, not with the promise of a new day, but with the cold, gray light of reckoning. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the asphalt slick and black, reflecting the flashing lights of a federal takeover. The police station, usually a fortress of unquestioned local authority, had been effectively annexed by the United States government. The parking lot, typically reserved for patrol cruisers and the chief's oversized truck, was now a sea of black SUVs with tinted windows, military Humvees painted in woodland camouflage, and news vans that had sniffed out the scent of a major scandal like sharks sensing blood in the water. Inside the station, the dynamic had shifted violently. The air conditioning hummed with a frantic energy, struggling to keep up with the overcrowding. Federal agents in crisp suits moved with predatory efficiency, seizing file boxes, imaging hard drives, and tagging evidence. The local officers who had not been involved in the arrest stood against the walls, pale and silent, watching their world be dismantled. Chief Pike, Sergeant Beckett, and Officer Riley were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. They sat in separate interrogation rooms, stripped of their badges, their belts, and their weapons. They were isolated from one another, left to stew in the terrifying silence of their own thoughts, wondering who would be the first to break. Leading the federal inquiry was Special Agent Tessa Whitaker of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. She was a woman who made careers out of dismantling corrupt small-town departments, possessing a demeanor that was as sharp and unforgiving as a scalpel. She walked into the observation room where Colonel Thorne and General Voss stood. Zara was watching Officer Riley through the one-way glass. She had refused medical attention beyond a quick check of her wrists and a cold compress for her cheek. She wanted to be here. She stood with her arms crossed, the deep purple bruises on her wrists stark against the soft cream wool of her sweater. Her posture was rigid, her face a mask of terrifying calm. She was not looking at a man. She was looking at a target. "We have a problem, General," Agent Whitaker said, her voice tight with frustration as she closed the heavy soundproof door behind her. Zara did not turn around. Her eyes remained fixed on Riley, who was currently picking at a loose thread on his uniform trousers, his leg bouncing nervously. "Tell me." "The dash cam footage from Riley's cruiser is gone," Whitaker admitted, tossing a folder onto the metal table. According to their IT specialist, there was a sudden technical malfunction regarding the storage server, and the body cams, they were never turned on. Riley claiming he forgot in the heat of the moment. Thorne slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cups jump. "That is absolute garbage. We know they targeted her. They are scrubbing the crime scene." "Of course they are," Whitaker sighed, rubbing her temples. "But knowing it and proving it to a federal jury are two different things, Colonel. Without that footage, it's a he-said-she-said scenario. They're claiming you were erratic, General, that you were swerving across the center line, that you assaulted Riley first, and that they only found your ID after you were restrained. Pike is sticking to the story that this was a lawful stop gone wrong due to noncompliance." Zara turned away from the glass. Her eyes were dark and hard. She thought back to the rain, the blinding lights, the feeling of the cold car hood against her face. She replayed the scene in her mind with the tactical precision of a combat commander reviewing drone footage. She remembered the fear. Yes, but she also remembered the details: the gravel, the pine trees, the house. "There was a witness," Zara said softly. Whitaker looked up, her pen hovering over her notebook. "Who?" "We canvassed the immediate area. It's a rural road." "I do not know her name," Zara said, her voice steady. "Route 9, mile marker 42. There is a small white house directly across from where they pulled me over. It sits on a slight elevation, maybe yards back from the road. I saw a curtain move." Thorne looked at her. "In the middle of the arrest, you noticed a curtain?" "Situational awareness is what keeps you alive, Elias," Zara replied. "Someone was watching from the front window. The porch light was off, but the interior light was on. They saw everything." Whitaker grabbed her radio, her eyes lighting up. "Get a team to Route 9. Check the residence across from the arrest site. I want that door knocked on now." Soon after, an unmarked sedan rolled up the gravel driveway of Mrs. Beatrice Caldwell. She was a retired school librarian who spent her days tending to her azaleas and her nights watching the road from her favorite armchair. She had lived in Oak Creek her entire life, and she knew exactly what kind of men ran the town. When Agent Whitaker knocked on the door, Mrs. Caldwell did not look surprised. She looked relieved. She opened the door, clutching an iPad in her trembling, liver-spotted hands. "I knew you'd come," Mrs. Caldwell whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I saw the news vans this morning. I saw what those boys did to that lady last night. It wasn't right. It just wasn't right. She handed the iPad to Whitaker as if it were a holy relic. I recorded it. I learned how to zoom in last Christmas to film the grandkids' recital. I got it all. Whitaker accepted the device and pressed play. The video was shaky at first, shot through a rain-streaked window, but the audio, amplified by the quiet country night, was damningly clear. "Nice car. Whose is it?" Riley's voice sneered from the tablet, tiny but unmistakable. "You work at the commissary, maybe the laundry service." Then came the violence, the shove, the sickening sound of Riley planting his boot on the phone and grinding it into the gravel, and the kicker, the final nail in the coffin. Beckett's voice, clear as a bell, cutting through the rain. "We bury this in paperwork before the army finds out." Whitaker closed her eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, looking at the elderly woman, "you just took down the entire department." Back at the station, the atmosphere in the interrogation room changed the moment Whitaker walked back in. She did not sit down. She did not offer Riley a glass of water. She simply placed the iPad on the metal table, screen facing him, and pressed play. Riley watched his own career disintegrate in high definition. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. He watched the video in horrified silence. He heard his own arrogance, his own cruelty, played back to him. He saw himself destroying the phone, a federal crime. He heard himself conspiring to frame a general. When the video ended, the silence in the room was heavier than lead. "That's years for deprivation of rights under color of law," Whitaker said calmly, leaning against the wall. "Years for destruction of evidence, years for conspiracy. And since the victim is a high-ranking military official, we are looking at enhanced sentencing guidelines. You're looking at dying in federal prison, Dax." Riley began to shake. It started in his hands and spread to his shoulders until his teeth were chattering. He looked at the mirror, knowing Zara was behind it. I, Riley stammered. "Don't talk to the mirror," Whitaker snapped. "Talk to me. You have one card to play and it expires soon. Who gave the order?" Riley began to cry. It was not a dignified weep. It was the ugly, snot-nosed sobbing of a bully who had finally met someone bigger. "It was Beckett," Riley blubbered, slamming his hand on the table. "He told me to do it. He said she was just another. He said we needed the arrest stats for the grant money. I just did what I was told." "Just another what?" Whitaker opened her notebook, her pen poised. "Tell me everything. Start with Chief Pike." The dominoes began to fall one by one. In his desperation to save himself, Riley gave up everyone. He revealed a decade-long scheme of targeting minority drivers in luxury cars, seizing their assets under dubious civil forfeiture laws to pad the department's budget. They had been stealing cash, cars, and jewelry, then burying the complaints. They had been running a highway robbery ring with badges. By noon, the FBI was hauling boxes of files out of Pike's office. By afternoon, the governor of Georgia had announced the immediate suspension of the Oak Creek police leadership. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Zara stood by the back exit of the station. 2 federal marshals were leading Riley out to a waiting transport van. He was no longer the swaggering cop who had shone a flashlight in her eyes. He was a criminal in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the waist and ankles. He looked up as he passed her. He slowed down, trying to meet her eyes. Perhaps to beg for forgiveness, perhaps to find some shred of mercy in her face. Zara did not look away. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply offered him the same cold, professional indifference he had denied her the night before. She looked through him, past him, as if he were already a ghost, a memory of a problem she had already solved. Riley dropped his head, defeated, and shuffled into the van. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed across the parking lot. Zara watched it drive away, then checked her watch. It was time to get back to work. Later, the heat in Atlanta was oppressive, a physical weight that pressed down on the city, turning the air into a shimmering haze of humidity and exhaust. Outside the federal courthouse, the atmosphere was chaotic. News vans from every major network lined the streets, their satellite dishes pointed toward the cloudless sky like silent prayers for a signal. Protesters, supporters, and curious onlookers jostled for position behind the heavy metal barricades, their voices creating a low, restless roar that penetrated even the thick stone walls of the judicial building. Inside courtroom 4B, however, the air was frigid and still. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered the usual rustle of clothing and whispers of spectators. This was not just a trial about a traffic stop on a rainy night. It had become a national referendum on integrity, the abuse of power, and the rot that can hide behind a badge. The case of United States versus. Pike, Beckett, and Riley had captivated the country, peeling back the layers of a corrupt small-town department to reveal the darkness underneath. Lieutenant General Zara Voss sat in the front row, a singular island of calm in the sea of tension. Today she had shed the civilian camouflage of cashmere and slacks. She wore her Army service uniform, the dress blues. The dark fabric was immaculate, tailored to perfection. On her shoulders, the 3 silver stars gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, a stark reminder of the authority she wielded. Her jacket was heavy with the history of her service, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, the Defense Distinguished Service Medal. Each ribbon was a testament to a battle fought, a crisis managed, a sacrifice made. She sat with a posture that was less posed and more disciplined, her back straight, her hands resting calmly on her knees. To the casual observer, she looked unbreakable. But internally, Zara felt the fatigue of the depositions, the media scrutiny, the reliving of that humiliating night over and over again. It had taken a toll. Yet she refused to show it. She was a general officer of the United States Army. Composure was not just expected, it was required. She had testified the previous day. The defense attorneys, desperate and cornered, had tried every trick in the book. They had attempted to paint her as an angry woman, a hypersensitive elite who had misunderstood the good intentions of local law enforcement. They had tried to twist her words to suggest she had provoked the officers. Zara had simply dismantled them. She had not raised her voice. She had not engaged in emotional outbursts. She had used logic as a weapon, citing the exact statutes the officers had violated with a precision that left the defense team stuttering and silent. Now it was time for the end. Judge Victor Lang entered the courtroom. The bailiff's cry of "All rise" snapped the room to attention. Lang was a stern man known for his intolerance of corruption and his harsh sentences for those who betrayed the public trust. He took his seat, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, and looked down at the 3 defendants. The contrast between the men who had terrorized Zara on the roadside and the men sitting at the defense table was jarring. Chief Desmond Pike, the man who had run Oak Creek like a personal kingdom, looked shrunken. His suit hung loosely on his frame, and his skin had the gray, pasty complexion of a man who had not seen the sun in months. Sergeant Lyle Beckett, once the confident bully, looked angry and cornered, his jaw set in a tight line of defiance. And Dax Riley just looked young. The swagger was gone, replaced by the terrified, wide-eyed look of a child who realizes the game has gone too far. Judge Lang shuffled the papers on his bench. The sound echoed like a thunderclap in the quiet room. "In my years on the bench," Judge Lang began, his voice deep and resonant, reaching every corner of the gallery, "I have presided over murderers, thieves, and fraudsters. But I have rarely seen such a flagrant systemic abuse of power as I have seen in this case. You men were entrusted with the sacred duty of public safety. You were given a badge, a gun, and the authority of the state. Instead of using that power to protect, you used it to terrorize, to steal, and to intimidate." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the defendants. He turned his gaze first to the youngest of them. "Dax Riley, please stand." Riley scrambled to his feet, his knees knocking together. He gripped the table for support. "You are young," the judge said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that allowed no argument. "But your actions were those of a seasoned criminal. You profiled a woman based on nothing more than the color of her skin and the car she drove. You assaulted a decorated officer of the United States Army. You destroyed evidence in a futile attempt to cover your tracks. I sentence you to years in federal prison with no possibility of parole." A wail erupted from the back of the courtroom. Riley's mother. The sound was raw and heartbreaking. Riley closed his eyes, his chin dropping to his chest as tears streamed down his face. He did not look at Zara. He could not. "Lyle Beckett, stand." Beckett stood slowly, glaring at the judge. "You were the supervisor," Lang continued, his voice hardening. "You were the veteran. You had a duty to correct Officer Riley. Instead, you escalated the situation. You taught a young officer how to lie, how to frame a suspect, how to bury the truth in paperwork. You are a disgrace to the uniform you once wore. You are sentenced to years." Finally, the judge looked at the center of the rot, Desmond Pike. Pike stood wiping sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. "You created the culture that allowed this to happen," Lang said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You authorized the asset forfeiture scheme that turned your department into a highway robbery ring. You tried to sweep this under the rug. You are the architect of this disgrace. I sentence you to years." The gavel banged. Crack. It sounded like a gunshot, final and irrevocable. As the bailiffs moved in with handcuffs, real handcuffs, not the tools of intimidation they had once used, Zara stood up. She did not cheer. She did not smile. There was no joy in this, only the grim satisfaction of a mission completed. She adjusted her cover, ensuring it sat perfectly on her head, turned on her heel, and walked down the center aisle. Outside on the courthouse steps, the heat hit her like a physical blow. A sea of microphones awaited her. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping in a chaotic cacophony. Cameras flashed like lightning, blinding in the afternoon sun. General Voss, do you have a statement? How do you feel about the verdict? General, is this justice?" Zara stopped at the top of the stairs. She looked out at the cameras, thinking about the millions of people who would see this on the evening news. She thought about the young soldiers under her command. She thought about the citizens who had been stopped on dark roads, people who did not have 3 stars to protect them. She raised a hand and the crowd fell silent. "Justice was served today," Zara said, her voice steady, projecting clearly to the back of the crowd without the need for a microphone. "But let us be clear. I was lucky. I had the rank, the resources, and the training to survive that encounter. Most do not. These men did not just attack me. They attacked the very idea that the law applies equally to everyone. Today, the system worked, but only because we forced it to work." She paused, looking directly into the lens of the nearest camera, her gaze piercing. "Do not mistake this victory for the end of the war. There are other roads, other dark nights, and other officers who have forgotten their oaths. We must all remain vigilant." Dismissed. She walked away, parting the sea of reporters like a ship cutting through water. A black government sedan was waiting at the curb, its engine purring. Colonel Thorne, her steadfast chief of staff, held the rear door open for her. "Where to, General?" Thorne asked as she slid into the cool leather interior of the back seat. Zara leaned back, finally letting her shoulders drop an inch. She looked out the window as the Atlanta skyline began to blur past. She thought about Mrs. Caldwell, the brave librarian who had filmed the encounter and who had sent her a card with a picture of her prize-winning azaleas just last week. She thought about the young black private who had stopped her in the hallway at the Pentagon just to say thank you. "Take me to the base, Elias," Zara said, pulling a thick logistics file out of her briefcase. "I have a supply chain briefing. The world does not stop just because the bad guys went to jail." As the car pulled away, merging into the heavy traffic of the interstate, Zara Voss did not look back at the courthouse. She looked forward. She was a soldier, and the mission continued. The karma had been delivered, the balance of the universe restored. But for the general, it was just another day. And that is how the arrogance of 3 corrupt officers met the unyielding force of a United States general. They thought they were picking on a helpless victim, but they picked a fight with the entire Pentagon and lost everything. It is a powerful reminder that while authority can be abused, integrity and truth have a way of fighting back, sometimes with the force of a Black Hawk helicopter. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Do you think the sentence was long enough? Let me know in the comments below. And do not forget to share this video with your friends and subscribe with the notification bell on so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.